So presbyopia is an aging process. So it happens to all of us, usually starting around the age of 40, and then it usually progressively gets worse into your 50s. And it essentially, I call it near vision loss. So essentially you lose the ability to see up close. And this is because your eye is no longer able to accommodate. So your lens is no longer able to change shape as it needs to see up close. And it's quite bothersome because it affects everyone. So no one's immune from it. And typically you'll start noticing it when things like menus or iPhones, so close-up items are no longer have that clarity. So you'll start getting kind of blurring of vision close up. And then, as I said, it usually gets worse the older you get until you completely lose accommodation. And then you develop complete presbyopia. So when you're in your 40s, we call it pre-presbyopia. So you're starting to lose that ability to accommodate. But then when you're, in your 50s or mid 50s, you've completely lost it. And then it becomes very apparent that you can no longer see menus and things. And you have to change your focal distance. So the long arm syndrome is because you're changing your focal distance to try and get it in focus based on how much accommodative amplitude you have left or how much accommodation you have left. So an 80-year-old won't have any accommodation and they won't be able to see up close.
So it affects everyone, does it? Like
It affects
regardless of
everyone.
what your default prescription
Yeah,
might
so
be.
it affects everyone, but if you're a myope, so if you're short-sighted, you're still able to see up close because of your prescription. So you'll still become presbyopic, you still lose that ability, but you'll be able to see. So you'll still notice that there'll be some change in your range of vision, but it's more apparent in people that are long-sighted or people that don't have a refractive error. So there's lots of people walking around, we call them emmetropes, where they don't have any kind of refractive error. But then when they hit about 45, they suddenly realize they can no longer see their iPhone as clearly as before. So for people that are emmetropic or no script, or people like me, I'm long-sighted, we notice presbyopia a lot more and it's a lot more bothersome for us. Whereas for myopes, it's not such a big deal, but they've always had the issue with the fact that they can't see in the distance clearly. So this procedure that we're going to talk about today, PRESBYOND, it's actually for people with all types of refractive error. So for myopes, so short-sightedness, long-sightedness, and no refractive error, it fixes refractive error, but it also fixes the near vision loss.
Mm. Okay. So, like, what have traditionally been some of the solutions for people who do get this condition of presbyopia? Like,
Yeah, of
typically,
course.
what would people do if they were in that situation?
So the first thing people do is they make their iPhone font bigger to try and account for that. And then obviously we've got readers. So you can go to your local optometrist and you can get some reading glasses or magnifying lenses. So there's lots of those options. So that's traditionally what most people have done. And then there have been laser options for presbyopia in the past. So there's been different types of lasers in the past. Different companies have had different platforms of which that can be done. So there's also been laser surgery. And then there's also what we call lens exchange or refractive lens exchange. So that's where we as surgeons remove your natural lens in your eye that's no longer accommodating and we replace it with a prosthetic or an artificial lens. And these lenses have the ability to correct for multiple distances. But obviously that's a more invasive procedure because we're going inside the eye. And usually we don't do that on anyone under the age of 50. Okay, generally. There's obviously exceptions to the rules all the time, but generally it's only for 50 and over. So it doesn't combat those early 40-year-olds or the 45-year-olds that are still developing this near vision failure.